Thanks for joining us for Wednesday's County Update here on Elko Live today. We have two guests in studio to talk about fire season. It's here. It's arrived. But we need to be prepared. There are a lot of things that you can do to prevent fire and then to best protect your family and your property. Matt Peterson is Elko County Fire Protection Chief, and you brought in today Clint Mothershed, Elko District BLM, Fire Mitigation Specialist and Fire Arson Investigator. So welcome, Chief Peterson. First of all, it's great to see you here.
Yeah, it's been a while. Glad to be back.
Thank you for the update, and welcome back, Clint.
Oh, thanks, Lori. It's also good to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate having both of you side by side to talk about this very important issue. Winnemucca's been super busy just this week. I mean, and they just wanted us to mention, to emphasize just how dry it is. And when the winds pick up those flames, they were scrambling. They had about 62 firefighters out on that air and ground crews, but it was moving.
Yeah, they just... Elko County and Elko BLM did their fuel moisture sampling, and we're about 112 to 119% in our sagebrush. And what that means is it's dry enough now where sagebrush will burn all night long and not kind of die with the overnight recovery. So fire season's here. We anticipate when we do get starts that they're going to last until we put them out. They're going to burn through the night even.
You know, Clint, sagebrush looks green. So, I mean, that it burns, I mean, it looks green.
Oh, yeah. It's misleading. Yeah, you can't, the visual observations won't tell you the true story about the fuel moisture in that species. It's adapted to the desert environment, so it could be a little misleading. Important thing to point out with the Winnemucca fires is those were human caused. So those could have been prevented if someone had just taken the time to observe the environment and realize maybe what they were doing. I don't know what happened, but... it's under investigation. It could have been a prevented fire.
Thanks, Clint,
and
for the reminder. Yeah.
They had two of those large fires and then a third one within a 24-hour period, all right around the city of Winnemucca. And I think that I hope our days are longer, but I think we're right around the corner of that happening here in Elko County.
So, yep, that's sort of an update on the current fire season outlook. First of all, it's arrived. And there are a number of factors. We just want to be ready. That's why demonstrating that the BLM alongside the county, Chief Peterson, NDF, the Forest Service, everybody is going to be working hard to keep us safe.
All of us are staffed currently. Our seasonals are all on. They're ready to go. We have additional engines that we've kind of ramped up a little bit in the county with some additional seasonals and a small hand crew. Our staffing countywide, though, with BLM, Forest Service, and NDF isn't the strongest we've ever had it. So our response to fires is going to be aggressive, but we may not have as many resources as we've had in the past.
So obviously we're concerned about places where we have that urban interface, right? A lot of homes, a lot of people that are not maybe used to this kind of a threat, who haven't got the message yet about what to do to create defensible space.
Oregon and Washington had a couple fires in the last couple days that have gobbled up, I think, 100 homes total. And so mostly here in Elko County, people do a decent job, but anything that they can do to move that vegetation away from their home, there's a lot of small businesses in the area that will come and do mowing and clear your property for you. We're working on some additional grants through the county to be able to come and remove the vegetation. If you cut it, you put it in the street, we'll come and get it and take it away, kind of things like that, so that we can help homeowners be more prepared. And that comes back to that insurance issue where everyone's insurance is getting dropped because of the wildland fire threat. And so we're trying to communicate that message back to the insurance companies locally and their corporate level more than anything. And we also work pretty regularly with the state insurance commissioner to try and figure out how to get some better data and better information back to those insurance companies.
Yeah, that's a big concern. Obviously, that's been happening a lot, as you said, not only locally, but certainly statewide, forested places, like Tahoe. Obviously, it's very difficult to get homeowners insurance because of the cost of these fires. So, Clint, I know that you talked too about, you mentioned it during the Winnemucca fires, human-caused fires and prevention. There's a lot that the BLM looks out for on public lands.
Oh, yeah. It's not just on the BLM, the public lands. It's also for the privately owned land as well. As Matt, we talked about earlier, is we're getting ready we're at fire season. I'd say we're probably about 3 weeks behind Winnemucca, just visually observing the cheatgrass between the two areas. So it's coming. and that kind of comes in line with 4th of July. So the public does need to know that fireworks are prohibited pretty much on all ends, public and private in the state. And you do not want to be that person that starts a fire in these conditions. We haven't seen the conditions that we have since, I believe, 2018 as far as the fuel loading goes. And that year we burned about 435,000 acres on Elko District, a big one being the Martin Fire that burned up the Hawaii Desert, started over by Paradise Valley. So, and I think that year, just BLM stat-wise, which we applied a specific code to for like paying for the fire and stuff, we had 55 human-caused fires this year. Last year we had 26. So I think, given the private fires, that number was significantly higher. So we're looking at a busy season. I don't think we can overstress that, and it's going to be a long season. And so, people just need to realize kids are out of school. They'll be driving UTVs, ATVs, recreating, and it's up to the parents to educate their kids on keeping it on trails, and if your ATV isn't running right, go get it worked on, get it looked at. Make sure you have a good exhaust on it, that the screen that's inside of that exhaust is still intact so it can block carbon particulate. And then, it's going to take us all to minimize that number of human-caused fires that we're probably going to see this year.
Clint Mothershed is Elko District BLM, Fire Prevention Education Specialist, and alongside Chief Matt Peterson from Elko County Fire Protection. And Chief Peterson, obviously these human-caused fires, big concern. A lot of accidents in places like Spring Creek. People just weren't thinking, right, and did not expect something like that to happen.
Some of them are just a series of unfortunate events of they were out there trying to mow their property and we'll get sparks off of rocks or things like that. We do get folks that have bonfires or cooking fires, or they're just out enjoying themselves. You can go on and get a burn permit from us for those warming and cooking fires, and it also helps to call our dispatch center so that they're not sending people to your property in the middle of the night. A lot of times neighbor will call in and say there's a fire burning, so we encourage people to be good neighbors. Tell their neighbors, hey, we're going to have a warming fire. Make sure there's good defensible space around that. Make sure that there's a mesh guard over it, and don't leave it unattended. Something we've seen a spike in the last couple of years is high school kids and younger kids like to have a good time, and some of that involves going out in the hills and maybe having a bonfire. We've responded to a couple of those. That cost the district a lot of money, and I think in the early 2000s, it cost one family a couple $1 million because kids started a fire and it burned about 25,000 acres outside of Carlin. So we don't want that to be something that someone has to saddle that burden. So that's making sure that parents are communicating, like Clint said, with their kids of be smart, be safe.
Mm-hmm. These are so-called nuisance fires or party fires. Again, illegal campfires, bonfires, any kind of a gathering that might spark a fire. And you're going to get lights and siren. And, again, there are penalties that are serious. That's what Clint does, is you investigate these fires to determine the cause.
Yeah. And, the county has their own fire investigators as well. So as far as the BLM goes, we are mandated to investigate any fire now that burns any BLM land. So even if a fire starts on privately owned land, I do have a responsibility and a duty to investigate those fires. And it's all about recovering if the fire is determined to be negligent. So a lot of these fires, it's an innocent action that the people do. It's out enjoying themselves for the summer, and no one can fault them for that. But sometimes the way I interpret the situation that a fire started is not the same way the Department of Justice interprets it. And ultimately what happens is people are held liable for some of the suppression costs, which is taxpayer funded when we have to put out fires that could have been prevented. That's why we're increasing our efforts on not only educating the public, all the events we've got going on, all the billboards you see around town. You're going to start seeing some stickers and stuff at businesses. We're going to do a little more of an outreach since fire season's right around the corner. And on top of that, radio shows like this help a lot. So it's not the favorite part of my job. I'll just say that, but it is my job. And we've had to recover a decent amount of money on behalf of the U.S. taxpayer.
Thanks for being here, Clint Mothershed, alongside our County Fire Protection Chief, Matt Peterson. And that brings us to this coordinated wildfire response, right, Chief Peterson? Because people hear a lot of things. There's some mixed messages coming out of the national level. We know there's an executive order right now about, coordinated fire response. But locally, basically, agencies are doing what needs to be done here at home.
Yeah, in rural Nevada, it's a little different than some of the larger cities in Washoe County or Clark or even Salt Lake area. We have always had a very good coordinated response. The call comes into our 911 dispatch center. We immediately notify our neighbor, the interagency dispatch center, which does wildland. And so as we do that, there's a coordinated response. There's the county side plus all the wildland side, which includes the hand crews, the dozers, the aircraft, the seats, the things like that, the single engine air tankers. And so we will continue to have an aggressive response. We're just too rural to try and do it independently. So we have a great working relationship. Like Clint just talked about, when there's fires that burn federal land, he even shows up and he will help us with our investigation on private land and vice versa. We have a handful of fire investigators that also do the same thing with Clint. And so it's a very good and very positive relationship. And that extends just beyond fire suppression as well. It goes into the fuels mitigation, the prevention, the community coordination piece. We all work very well together.
And that includes, coordinating some of the air as well as ground attacks, right? Because we do have an air force, I guess, that comes in.
Yep, absolutely. As soon as that dispatch goes through, on the county side, as soon as the interagency side dispatches, all county resources will switch to that frequency. So we have common communications and we're all talking to the right people at the right time.
Well, we also have, it's important to mention that there's been a lot of work going on, even during the winter months, right, Chief, to mitigate, to knock down some of the fuels, the threats around these rural communities.
Yeah, so we have actually a BLM grant that Clint helps administer, and he's an oversight project manager with us. We were doing a BLM grant that we received 2 years ago, and we're going into the third year, and I think it goes for 5 years, but we're treating South Fork, 10 Mile, and then this year we'll start in the Wells-Moore Summit area. And so that is just to create fuel breaks around towns, also to help do some education in that same aspect. The Forest Service and NDF have provided us additional grants in the Spring Creek, Lamoille, Shantytown, Ruby Valley area. So there's literally fuels work going on almost everywhere in the entire county. We still have our agreement with NV Energy, which we took about a year off, or a little bit of pause on it, just to clean up some projects and some coordination with them. That's starting again this year. They've awarded us about $1.4 to $1.5 million to treat pretty much all the lines that are south of the river here in Elko all the way to Lamoille. And so those are trying to clean up those NV Energy lines and create defensible space around them. And they're also used for fuels breaks and fire breaks. So when a fire hits those lines, it has a chance to slow down.
Well, that is definitely some significant mitigation, Chief Peterson. And as you said, stretches, from 10 Mile to Elko and Elko to Lamoille.
Yep, and that's just the NV Energy one. The other ones, we have funding, and we always constantly search for funding and grants to treat almost every community in the county. We have projects in Midas, Tuscarora, Mountain City. We have additional ones in Jarbidge. Literally almost every single community in Elko County, we have a planned project and funding that shouldn't be too far behind it.
Well, and we should talk about, Shantytown. That is a recreational, I guess, a village, if you will, or a collection of cabins in the vicinity of the Ruby Marshes. So maybe you could describe for us what a mosaic treatment is, because it's important that it preserves that landscape, right, for people who go there to recreate.
Yep. So we just had a community meeting Tuesday, in Shantytown with the residents there. We're doing a fuels project that's going to thin out everything around town for up to 1,000 feet, and they're trying to extend that with the Forest Service. But we're looking to thin every tree that's about 10 to 20 foot spacing, so that it's not a large fire that does impact town. And so we try and do that for not only the visual effects for the community, but the wildlife, as well as we don't want a project that doesn't benefit the community. If we do a clear cut around there and they're not happy with it, probably not the best representation of the Forest Service, BLM, NDF, and the county.
So that is a project, obviously, that gets a lot of input, and that's important. That's the kind of work that gets done through Elko County Fire Protection and, of course, in collaboration with the Elko District BLM, because we appreciate both of our guests here today to talk about that. So here's something. I've never heard of the NDF disaster funding. We thought at least that Nevada Division of Forestry was kind of scaling back, right? But it sounds like they're stepping up.
So U.S. Forest Service and NDF received some funds in the last couple of years. It's about $6 million in one pot, and we're going to utilize a large chunk of that in the Spring Creek Marina, the trailer section, as well as all the way in the Lamoille, pretty much to Secret Pass, to try and eliminate some of those large overgrown fuels and create defensible space along roadways so that people have good evacuation paths and they can get in and out of communities.
That is great, because it's a perfect segue into the big question that we get all the time, is especially from people who are new, to say, wait a minute, what about evacuation? Where do we go? How do we get there? The county has been involved in that with our local county emergency planner, right? Lee Cabanis?
Yeah, one of the big things and a misconception is everybody is very worried about a one-way road in and out of Spring Creek, and that is a hot topic. No pun intended, or pun intended, we can do that. If there's a fire that is so large that we're evacuating all of Spring Creek, that's going to be a pretty significant event. In reality, a fire is going to impact small areas of Spring Creek, and we like to tell people they need to have their own plan as well as a large plan. Whether it's go to the high school parking lot, the Corey's parking lot, some of the parks, the sports event centers, and we call those refuge areas. You can go there and you can hunker down there until it is cleared out, and then you can get to a safer place. We really talk about evacuating a neighborhood more than a community. So if your fire is being impacted in your 10th Street neighborhood, that's what we need to think about instead of thinking about the global, we're going to evacuate all of Spring Creek. And that's really hard to communicate to people. Sometimes they just, in their mind, we're going to evacuate all of Spring Creek, and that's
like 16,000 people.
Yeah, probably not going to happen in a super quick time frame.
Right.
But we would start with the communities and neighborhoods that are closest to that fire, and then we'll continue to move out. If it continues to move, we'll continue to move the evacuation zones.
And I do think that, Clint, you're a good person to talk about this. I mean, I believe you grew up in the valley there, in the Spring Creek area. You know about, the congestion, the realities of people with pets and livestock. So how important is that planning, family planning, the logistics?
Well, I'll start out and just refer the public to go to NevadaFireInfo.org or livingwithfire.com, and they have some great checklists on Living with Fire, where you can actually go through it and come up, you're thinking about your heirlooms and all that stuff. It's extremely important. You need to plan ahead. I've heard in the past that the horse house would be somewhere you might be able to take some of your agricultural, some of your pets for the short term, just to get them to a safe spot. So it's extremely important that people consider the possibility. We talk about this a lot, I know, Lori, but a lot of the seminars and stuff I go to learn more to better at my job, you hear about the story that people just thought that this could never happen to them. And then when it did, you have to hear their stories, and they're heart-wrenching. Honestly, they lose everything. They lose their family heirlooms, all this stuff that just can't be replaced. And I think it's important to stress to the public that this, for example, Spring Creek is, I think, 5,500 structures at least, if not more, out there. And we don't have enough fire trucks, which is something we always talk about too, Lori. We don't have enough fire trucks for all everybody's driveways. So it goes back to that home hardening. I mean, the BLM, we're doing our own fuels treatments outside of the communities. We've got the green strips to the south and west of Spring Creek, to the north of Spring Creek, the mobile section. We do that to prevent fires, hopefully, and we mow them on a biannual basis. We actually were ahead of schedule, so we mowed some additional ones outside of the normal maintenance schedule, just based off of what we were expecting this season. But we do that just to prevent fires from either leaving the community, getting onto BLM land, or vice versa. So there's a lot that goes into it. I know that inside of Spring Creek, there's a lot of green strips that have been mowed. Like, there are fire breaks within there, but it comes back to the individual homeowners. They need to take care of their own property too. We can only do so much, and if we pull up to your house and you have not done any work as far as mowing the grass, making it a safe environment for firefighters to take that last stand to protect your structure and all your collectibles, they will move on to a home that they think they can, because in the end, it's important that they come home safely to their families.
Talking with Clint Mothershed, Elko BLM District. We are here on the doorstep, if not in fire season, depending on where you live or work in or recreate in the listening area. Chief Matt Peterson is with Elko County Fire Protection. He is the chief of that division and is collaborating and coordinating a lot of our emergency planning efforts as well. As you talked about, creating those green spaces. So, gentlemen, there's something here about alerts. People can maybe sign up for apps, or, is that something that we're doing locally?
So you can sign up through Code Red right now, and it's we utilize the state through that. So sometimes it takes a little bit of delay to get from our local to the state and have them help us publish that information. The state received a grant for an app called Perimeter, and that will break pretty much the entire county up into communities and neighborhoods that when we determine that there's a fire, it'll automatically start notifying that, hey, this is an evacuation zone. We're hoping to have that up and in place and running in the next 12 months. But we encourage everyone to listen to the news outlets. We try and communicate with them as fast as possible. Sometimes they learn about it through our social media posts, which is, we're just limited staffing. So we appreciate that our news partners pay attention and they help us publish that information. And if folks have not, there's a new app out there and it's called Watch Duty. There's a free version. It tells you about fires that are in your county, allows you to just know what's kind of some situational awareness of what's going on in and around Elko County.
So those are all apps. And again, you coordinate with, say, the sheriff's office, right? Because if there were to be any kind of neighborhood evacuation, as you said, those folks might be the first to go in and help get people out safely.
Yes, and we're trying to do a WUI tabletop drill, so a Wildland Urban Interface tabletop drill with the sheriff's office and some of our partners, probably right around the 4th of July. It shouldn't be a big impact to communities at all, but just kind of going through the steps of what it would take for us to evacuate folks, how we set up those evacuation centers, where those evacuation centers are for people, large animals, small animals, things like that. Clint kind of briefly talked about it, that the Horse Palace is identified as one of our large animal evacuation centers, as well as the Elko County Fairgrounds. And then we have some ad hoc overflow places if we need them. But that's where people need to be prepared to kind of take some of their animals.
And then, as was mentioned just a short time ago in the program, seek out the refuge, if you will, seek out the pavement, which are vast parking lots. There are a number of those in the Spring Creek area, or the green spaces like they talked about. Those places wouldn't likely burn over. It would have to be some sort of inferno. That would be crazy.
Yeah, and you, as you find your refuge area, there may be smoke, but if it's green grass around you and you're in a sports field or the golf course or Brent Park or the high school, those are safe places. The smoke will be inconvenient, but you should be able to survive. You should be able to keep your family and friends safe and wait out the event.
Communication's important, and Clint has done a really good job. You work on this year-round. Clint, it's about planning, communicating. A lot of parents, kids are home for the summer, maybe home alone or home with older siblings. You got to talk about this with your family, right? What would you do if?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some kids just are left at home to their own devices throughout the day, and again, it's you got to stress to people that if there is a fire, let's say in Spring Creek with some pretty strong winds behind it pushing it, you're probably not going to be allowed back in the community to take care of anything. It could be a case by case, but they can't be congested if the smoke's impeding the roads. It could be one of those nightmarish apocalyptic scenarios where it's a different environment when you're in the belly of the beast, so to speak, and you just can't see. You get your bearing, you drive past fire in your vehicle, and it actually radiates immediately through the window of the vehicle. You can feel it penetrating. So it's definitely important to come up with a plan. What would you do? How would you protect the animals? Would you turn on your sprinklers? Would you do anything like that? They don't necessarily recommend you turn on your sprinklers because that would take some of the water pressure possibly away from the hydrants. But, you got to do what you got to do. And especially a safe haven for them. Your kids are at home. they don't have a vehicle. They can't get to one of these open areas. What are they going to do? What's their plan? So I think it's extremely important. And if they go to livingwithfire.org, I think it'd give them some content that would help initiate that discussion with their children, just to come up with that plan. And maybe it's just coordinating with the neighbor that does have a vehicle in case something happens. I know we're a community, pretty tight knit, and I think everybody tries to look out for everybody else. Matt referred to all these other places for large animals, and I believe there would probably be some ranchers that'd be willing to take on some people's livestock too if that became the case, just to help them out, because it's a great community for that type of stuff.
Thanks, Clint, for the reminder. Well, with just a few minutes that we have left in the program, again, great information about, the fire season outlook, how to harden your home, create defensible space, prevent those human-caused fires, because Mother Nature does her worst when we get into lightning season. We didn't really talk about that because a lot of us, we don't need to. We look at the sky and see those thunderheads developing. But I thought maybe with Chief Peterson, we could spend some time, because I think it's important the community know that this department has really stepped up in the last several months, but certainly several years when it comes to planning. You presented recently to county commissioners. We have a lot of new equipment, and we have some fire stations that have been built in collaboration with communities. That's a lot of coordination.
Yeah, so we currently have a handful of fire stations being built. We just got our certificate of occupancy for our new Osino station, and that's part of the Rendon Osino Volunteer Fire Department.
That's huge.
It's huge. It's so great. It reduces response times, because we had volunteers that lived in Osino. They would have to drive to Rendon to get a fire truck to go back to Osino. And so in the next year, we're hoping that there will be 3 trucks in each station. So that's a large response force for that Rendon, Osino, Elbers, River Ranch, Kittredge, White Rock. They support all of those communities the same. Currently underway, there's one right at Deeth. For some property that was donated from one of our volunteers to the volunteer fire department to build a new station. In August, Ruby Valley should be starting groundbreaking on their volunteer fire station. There's opportunities to utilize that as a community center, also in an evacuation point. It'll be located right next to the school. We did award a grant to North Fork, but I think they found another avenue to save the county money and get a new station going with a partnership through NDOT. So that'll be pretty exciting, but we hope to continue to build these stations, because that does in fact affect people's insurance rates. It helps us demonstrate that we're being responsible with taxpayer money of, hey, we're building these nice stations with nice equipment in it to respond to your emergency. And so those things are pretty important to us. And Clint had recently just talked about, we always, in school as we're growing up, we have that rendezvous point with our kids of, if the house is on fire, you evacuate, this is where we meet. Families need to come up with that same plan of the kids that are left out home alone. If there's a wildland fire, what do you do? And so having that pre-plan is extremely important.
Make those plans. Again, don't be afraid of those conversations. Kids can kind of get into that thing too, and they like to feel safe and knowing that their family, their parents are thinking about that when they're away at work. Well, I guess just wanted to make sure too, you've been able to buy new equipment. Chief Peterson, the county, I think your budget took a bit of a ding recently. Are we going to be okay going into the next year?
It should be okay. They revised the infrastructure tax to make it more public safety oriented, just not the fire district. And I think working with the commissioners in the county, we've made some good concessions of trying to be responsible with that. And we understand there's other public safety needs too. And so as long as we can continue to provide good quality equipment and stations and
training,
PPE to our volunteers to respond to these incidents, I think we'll be just fine.
Okay. And again, those you coordinate, as you talked about, with your fire, police, county ambulance, sheriff. I mean, there are all kinds of emergency entities that you're working very closely with.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we coordinate with everyone in the county. 2 more things before we close out.
Please.
We anticipate closing open burning for the rest of the year, probably starting on the 27th, so no later than next Friday, but we are going to close it tomorrow for the day, and maybe potentially even into Friday. There's a red flag warning that is in place from 11 a.m. tomorrow on Thursday till 11 p.m. for high winds and low humidity and heat. So everybody that's out playing in the hills, be careful, be safe.
All right, that's a red flag warning, and that will take effect Thursday, the entire day, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., and then we could close burning because right now you've got to go online and get that burning permit, right?
Yep, you can go to the Elko County website or you can go to Elko Fire Permits. And then for additional information, Clint can talk about Nevada Fire Info just to get that plug in again.
Sure. To close out, Lori, first, I do want to just stress to the public that Chief Peterson has done a great job with his agency. When I first started here, the county really wasn't even an entity that exists outside of just the VFD stations that are still operational. And since then, they have increased their footprint significantly as far as resources go and what they do and how they help communities. So it's only been a win-win for the residents of this community. This Friday is going to be Wildfire Awareness Night at the Silver State Stampede. There's going to be some pointers there for the people on the Jumbotron about, learning a little bit more about how to create that defensible space around their homes, some fire prevention stuff. And then, I had one more thing. Oh, big one. Fire restrictions, all agencies, July 1st, they're going to kick into effect. Stage 1, you can go to nevadafireinfo.org to learn more about those specifically. There will be press releases, and it's not only Elko County, it's NDF, which is state parks, it's BLM, it's U.S. Forest Service, it's everybody. We're all aware, all agencies, even for Elko District, BLM, Northern Lander, and Eureka counties are both part of our district. And so those counties are aware. I spoke to people yesterday, and they are going to go into fire restrictions too. So everybody's aware of the threat that we face this summer. And all I could ask is that people do their best to help prevent fires. Just think about what you're doing. Is it worth it? Is it risky? If you're going to go shooting, go early in the morning. First light when the humidity is its highest. And I bet you we still see a fire at the Elko Gun Range just based off of just sheer science, ballistics and all that type of stuff. So the kinetic energy. So it is what it is. But people can do something to help prevent these fires. And it just really comes down to thinking about what they're doing and if it's worth it.
Clint Mothershed, Elko BLM District Fire Mitigation Specialist, our Elko County Fire Protection Chief, Matt Peterson. Thank you both, gentlemen. We really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Lori.
Thanks, Lori.